The Notebook of Doom. Battle of the Boss Monster. Chapter 1, A Year in Stormont. Alexander's dad grinned up at the calendar on the wall. "Look at that, kiddo," he said. "It's been 1 year since we moved to this kooky town." Alexander rinsed out his cereal bowl. "Kooky?" he asked. "Yeah, you know," his dad said. "There's always weird stuff happening here in Stormont: flat tires, strange weather, power outages." Those were all monster attacks: balloon goons, snombies, and zapper bugs, thought Alexander. "Speaking of weird stuff," his dad said, "not every kid has a birthday once every 4 years. That's why I'm throwing you the weirdest birthday party ever tomorrow." He handed Alexander an invitation. "I've already invited your friends Rip and Nikki," said Alexander's dad. "Feel free to invite anyone else." He stuffed a stack of invitations into Alexander's backpack. "Geez, Dad," said Alexander. "I don't dash." Alexander was interrupted by a low rumbling noise coming from outside. It sounded like a giant whoopee cushion. "A monster," he thought. He started for the door. "Al, wait," yelled his dad. "Don't forget your lunch." He tossed Alexander his lunch box. "Packed your favorite treat?" "Triple power pucker pickles?" asked Alexander. "Precisely," said his dad. "Oh, and be sure to share them with Rip and Nikki." Blow brr 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 brr. The noise outside was even louder. "Okay," said Alexander. "Unless they're already monster chow." Chapter 2, Pucker Up. Alexander raced toward the splattery sound in the woods. He jogged along logs and jumped over stumps until he came to an old, broken-down caboose. The super-secret Monster Patrol was a group of monster fighters sworn to protect Stormont. Alexander was the leader. This caboose was their headquarters. Clack! A hatch on the roof flew open, and the 2 other club members popped out. Nikki Hubbard. Hero in a hoodie. Super secret, Nikki is actually a good monster, called a jamper. Eats red juicy stuff. Avoids sunlight. Sees in the dark. Rip Bonkowski. Bully with a heart of gold, silver, bronze. Super secret. Rip is actually a good monster, called a knuckle-fisted punch smasher. Eats sweets to transform into monster mode. Communicates with ant monsters called Ginormants. Bright blue spots. Clicky antennae. Razor-sharp mandible. "Watch out, salamander!" Nikki shouted, calling Alexander by his nickname. "The monster is coming your way." Alexander turned to see a big purple monster barreling toward him. The monster bowled into Alexander, knocking him over. It leapt onto his chest and licked him 39 times. Yuck! Alexander yutched. He was drenched in slobber. "This monster is a purple slurper. It's got 39 tongues and loves to lick stuff." "Yeah," said Nikki. "It slurped half the paint off our caboose." "How do we stop it?" Rip shouted. Alexander had an idea. He squirmed against the squishy, purple tongues as he reached into his backpack. He flipped open his lunch box. A sour vinegar smell cut through the air. Flurp! Alexander jammed a triple power pucker pickle into one of the monster's many mouths. Gack! The purple slurper's tongues flailed like frightened snakes. MRRPHH. The big tongue-tied monster made 39 sour faces, then flopped off into the woods. "Next time, lick on somebody your own size," Rip shouted. Nikki rushed to help Alexander to his feet. His shoes squished as he stood up. That was strange, said Alexander. Slurpen normally live under dinner tables. So why's this one in the woods? Asked Nicky. I don't know, replied Alexander. I just wish could update the monster notebook. Yeah, said Rip, but the dumb old boss monster swiped it. Boss Doom. Beat up old notebook filled with monster facts. The S.S.M.P super secret weapon. Now in the claws of the horrible boss monster, whoever she is. Terrible, mysterious. Boss monster. Who is she? Don't forget that the boss monster stole our principal, too, said Nicky. Ms. Vanderpants' cranky principal. Super secret, Miss Vanderpants is actually a good monster, called it an armadillo. Armored shell. Pointy horn. We need to find this big boss monster and show her who's boss, said Rip. Sure, said Alexander, if only we knew where to look. Let's start with the one grown-up in town who can see monsters, said Nicky. Good idea, said Alexander. School's about to start. I bet he's already hiding under his desk. Chapter 3, Principal Horsley. Look, said Alexander as the friends jogged to school. The purple slurper isn't the only monster out today. There were signs of monsters everywhere. The three friends ran a little faster and soon arrived at school. Weird, said Nicky. There has never been a guard out front before. Move along, toddlers, said the guard. No funny business. That's Miss Sargent from the Sturmont Museum, Rip whispered as they passed through an X-ray scanner. She's tougher than Purex teeth. Mr. Horsley must have hired her, Alexander said. He's really taking the security stuff seriously, said Nicky. Well, he did watch Vanderpants get nabbed by a monster, said Rip. That is exactly why we need to talk to him, said Alexander. Come on. The friends rode the escalators up to the 13th floor. The door to the principal's office was closed. Alexander knocked. Eep! Open up, Horsley! Rip yelled. Forget it, the shaky voice called back. It is too dangerous out there. Alexander leaned toward the door and spoke calmly. It's about Principal Vanderpants. The door swung open and Mr. Horsley waved them in. He wore a baggy suit that made him look like a half-stuffed scarecrow. Did you find her? He asked. Not yet, said Nicky. Mr. Horsley's shoulders drooped, making his jacket look even baggier. We need her, he said. Miss Vanderpants was the SSMP's best monster fighter. Rip's jaw dropped. What? Vanderpants was in the monster patrol? Well, sure, said Mr. Horsley. The SSMP was her idea. She created the notebook. No way, said Alexander. Yes way, said Mr. Horsley. But how? Asked Nicky. Mr. Horsley looked out the window as he spoke. I met Helen Vanderpants when I was just a kid. I was playing in Durwood Park when a cheese blaster attacked me. I was so scared that my black hair turned bright white. But then Helen showed up. She transformed. And saved me. I've been by her side ever since. I joined her club, the SSMP, and we battled monsters together for a while. But later, the SSMP disbanded. Then Helen became a principal so she could protect the kids of Sturmont and look for new monster fighters. That's how Miss Vanderpants found you, Alexander. She has had her eye on you since the day you moved to Sturmont. She was pleased that you restarted the SSMP. She even gave you one-on-one lessons to test you to see if you were ready to help her battle the big boss. Now I am ready, said Alexander. Except we can't find the boss monster. We've searched everywhere. Not everywhere. Mr. Horsley jingled a keychain that said MSVDP. Chapter 4, The Birthday Rule. On the day Miss Vanderpants got snatched, said Mr. Horsley, she'd been driving around, looking for the boss monster. Alexander grabbed the keys. We should search her car for clues. Alexander, Rip, and Nicky raced down to the lobby, with Mr. Horsley trailing behind. Slow down, shouted a short man with a big mustache. It was Mr. Plunkett, Alexander's old teacher. Where are you goofballs off to in such a hurry? Asked Mr. Plunkett. Oh, stammered Mr. Horsley. We're looking for monsters, said Rip, rolling his eyes. They're all over town. Ha! Good one, said Mr. Plunkett. You crack me up, Bonkowski. He continued on his way. Mr. Horsley sighed. It's a shame Mr. Plunkett can't see monsters anymore. Anymore? Asked Nicky, stopping in her tracks. What do you mean? Rodney Plunkett was the third member of the original SSMP. We were fighting a three-eyed something or other at his 8th birthday party. That's when Rodney flipped and the monster got away. Flipped? Asked Alexander. Yeah, said Mr. Horsley. Nobody can see monsters after their 8th birthday. Like our friend Dottie, said Alexander, his eyes widening. As soon as she blew out her birthday candles, she stopped seeing monsters. That's how it works, said Mr. Horsley. But monsters can always see other monsters. Like Rip and Nicky and Ms. Vanderpants. So how come you can still see monsters? Rip asked. Mr. Horsley sighed. Beats me. Tomorrow's my 32nd birth dash. Squeak! Alexander skidded to a halt on the shiny floor. Oh no! He slapped his head. What is it, Salamander? Asked Nicky. Tomorrow is my birthday, said Alexander. My 8th birthday. Chapter 5, Graveyard Shift. Alexander looked as though someone had dropped a piano on his head. I don't want to turn 8, he said. I can't leave the SSMP. Snap out of it, weenie, said Rip, shaking Alexander by the shoulders. Yeah. We've got a principal to rescue, said Nicky. Alexander nodded. You're right. I need to stay focused. Mr. Horsley led the three friends into the parking lot. He pointed to a clean, gray car. Have at it, he said. If you need me, I'll be under my desk. He sprinted back inside. Alexander unlocked the car, and the SSMP started searching for clues. They found a lint brush, a magazine, and a strange drawing. Why did Vanderpants draw a bunch of bumps with my name on M? Asked Rip. Nicky laughed. Rip, those are gravestones. R.I.P. means rest in peace. This drawing looks like it might be a map. It is a map, cried Alexander. That graveyard is near the Gloomy Mountains. And look, Miss Vanderpants circled one of the gravestones. We need to find that grave, said Rip. The friends hiked across town. By the time they reached the graveyard, the sky had turned as cold and gray as the gravestones at their feet. I'm starving, said Rip. Me, too, said Alexander. Let's eat before we look for that grave. They plopped down for a picnic. Nicky, cherry yogurt. Rip, cheese sandwich. Chocolate chunk cookies. Alexander, sour pickles. After lunch, they searched the graveyard. Heavy clouds were rolling fast overhead. Some of these gravestones look more like creepy statues, said Rip. Nicky quickly found the grave marked on the map. R.I.P. Elmer Muslage. He lived life slowly but died so much speedier when his factory was hit by a meteor. Who was Elmer Muslage? Alexander wondered aloud. Why would Ms. Vander dash? Alexander didn't finish his sentence. The stone reptile head on the grave next to him had turned to look him in the eye. Chapter 6, Rest in Pieces. With a gravelly grunt, the monster swung its heavy tail. Plomph! The stone reptile smashed Elmer Muslich's gravestone into a million pebbles. It's a crocodile, shouted Alexander. Split up! The friends took off in different directions. The crocodile turned in place like a board game spinner. Its snout pointed to Alexander. Then it tromped after him, its jaws wide open. How do we beat this boulder brain? Shouted Rip, clambering up a tree. Pit pit pat. Rain began to fall. Alexander tried to remember the crocodile pages of the notebook. Crocodile. Habitat surrounded by things made of stone. Diet, aquarium, sand. Behavior. Good news, this monster won't eat you with its powerful jaws. Bad news, instead, it will grind you into gravel. Just for fun. Wham! The crocodile's sledgehammer tail can smash boulders. Stone reptile. Fun fact. The crocodile got its name because it loves the electric guitar. Warning! You'd need heavy equipment like a wrecking ball to demolish a crocodile. We need a wrecking ball. Alexander yelled. Clomp! The monster's powerful jaws snapped at Alexander's heels. How about a smashy monster? Yelled Rip. That could work. Alexander called back. He ran left, then right. The crocodile's twisty body easily kept up, smashing graves along the way. I will snap you 2 bits, roared the crocodile. Its voice sounded like 2 bricks scraping together. Just like the boss monster ordered. You know the boss monster? Nikki asked, popping up from behind a grave. That's just the creature we're looking for. The rain was falling harder now, and the ground was slippery with mud. Nikki slipped and fell. The crocodile sprung toward her. Smashy, yelled Rip. He popped a chocolate chunk cookie into his mouth, jumped down, and transformed before his boots hit the ground. Monster Rip charged at the crocodile. The 2 monsters collided. Monster Rip slammed into the mud. Crick! Cracks spread along the crocodile's body. Then the monster crumbled into pieces. Rip sat up, muddy and back to normal. I did it, he said. He hopped to his feet and gave himself a high five. That totally rocked. Alexander shouted. Not totally, said Nikki. We should have asked the crocodile about the boss monster before Rip crushed it to rubble. We need to focus on Elmer Muslich, said Alexander. Why did Miss Vanderpants mark his grave? And dash flash. A bolt of lightning split the sky. Yikes, said Alexander. We should get home. See you bright and early tomorrow, said Nikki. Yeah, salamander. We need to make your last day in the SSMP really count, said Rip. Alexander got home just in time for dinner. Hey, Dad, Alexander asked with a mouthful of peas. Have you ever heard of someone named Elmer Muslich? Muslich. His dad said. Sounds familiar. Alexander swallowed. Ah yes, there was something in my old rocket kit, said his dad. He walked over to the closet and brought back a small, white bottle. Muslich glue, said Alexander. Yeah, said his dad. There was a Muslich glue factory here in Sturmont. It closed down years ago after some kind of freak accident like an earthquake or a tornado. The meteor! Alexander jumped up. Excuse me, Dad. Alexander ran to his room. His old Sturmont placemat maze was tucked into the frame of his dresser mirror. He traced his finger along the maze to an abandoned factory at the bottom left corner. Ms. Vanderpants must have been interested in this old factory, thought Alexander. He looked at his 7-year and 365-day-old face. Was the crocodile my last monster battle, ever? He sighed as he tucked the map into his backpack. Chapter 7, Plate of Eights. Alexander woke up to the best of all possible morning smells, pancakes. He got dressed and ran downstairs. "Happy birthday, Al," said his dad. "Let's start this date with a plate of eights." "Thanks, Dad," said Alexander, digging in. "But wait! Here's the greatest 8 of all." His dad handed him a gift with 8 bows. Alexander tore into the gift. Dress socks? He tried not to frown. "Heck, yeah," said his dad. "You're turning 8 today. No more comics or action figures for you big kids, get useful gifts." Thanks," Alexander mumbled. He tossed the gift into his backpack. "You're welcome," his dad said. "Now get out there and have fun. I'll see you after school for your party." Alexander hurried outside to find Rip and Nikki waiting in his front yard. "Birthday," they said at the same time. Alexander raised an eyebrow. "We would have said happy birthday," Nikki explained, "but we're not super happy about it." "Thanks, guys," said Alexander. "Now let's get moving. While I'm still me." "So, where to?" asked Rip. "School?" "Not yet," said Alexander. "I figured out who Elmer Muslage is. Was. He owned the old factory on the other side of town." Alexander opened his placemat maze and pointed to the abandoned glue factory.